All right. Hello, everybody. I'm a little bit, I just had to make a quick change to our slide presentation, and we were right up against the time there. So I'm just kind of catching my breath. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar. We are talking about increasing engagement rates, but a lot more than that. Using Hatch AI. We're talking about optimizing Hatch in today's webinar. I'm going to give you guys a minute or so to file in. We have a really great webinar lined up for you today, a really awesome speaker that I'm excited to chat with. And while you guys trickle in, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's see. What are your biggest challenges with lead management? So feel free to put in like where you're coming from, who you are and where you're coming from, as well as the challenges that you're facing with lead management. Put it in the chat. It just helps me to kind of set the stage and see who's here, what kinds of things you're looking to get out of this webinar, and we can kind of cater the conversation accordingly. And again, this is the Hatch AI in Action webinar, and I'm just letting everybody kind of trickle in. And then in a minute or so, we will do some introductions, and then we'll get started. Welcome, Jeff. I see Jeff is from New Jersey. Great to have you here, Jeff. Chris Landon from Connecticut. Great to see you. I myself am I'm in the Boston area. Jim is from Florida. Let's see. We've got Jeff K is talking about lack of appointments, conversion rates on aggregator leads. That's definitely a common complaint or pain point that we see. Dave Trumbull, tracking accurately is a challenge. Yes, that is a tough one, especially not just like your metrics, but tracking by lead source. That can be a tough one. Again, guys, when you come in here, put your name in the chat, where you're from, and what challenges you are facing with your inbound lead management. Skipper, great to have you here. Northern Michigan. Ron Tucker from Rockville, Maryland. We've got Andrew Hubble from Richmond. All right, I will let you guys continue to put in your where you're from and your pain points. Kelly Green, I see you. Speed to lead and consistency. I will let you guys continue to put that in. I am going to get us started. So today's webinar is Hatch AI in Action, increasing engagement rates by 33% with BaaS Solutions. My name is Kristen. I am the head of marketing here at Hatch, and I'm going to be hosting today. And I am joined here by Jim Gefkin of BaaS Solutions. Jim, why don't you introduce yourself and just give us a little background of where you're coming from.
So thanks, Kristen. I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be here. So I am the sole marketing person at BaaS Solutions. We're a family-owned and operated home remodeling company specializing in the bathroom segment, tubs to showers, showers to tubs, full bath remodels, etc. And we operate in Southwest Florida and pretty much just a 3-county area. So it's a very small business. And this is a big change for me from a career where I'd spent half of my career at advertising agencies supporting big clients, then taking the leap over to the client side. And then in the past 8 years, working in business to business. So this is a brave new world for me in this home improvement segment. But it's been a fascinating journey in terms of what I've been able to learn and discover and how to utilize the tools that are set up to make us effective. And I would probably say, last comment about myself is that I've always been a student of business. And I believe that every 15 years or so, we have to reinvent ourselves. And when we do that, we have to jump in and learn as quickly as possible. And data has been a pathway for me to get there.
Yeah. I love it. Jim, we've had a few conversations, and that is something that I kind of prefaced some of the communication about this webinar with was, you didn't have a whole lot of AI experience before this. And like like you said, home service marketing, B2C, like this is kind of new for you, but you did come into it with a metrics driven mindset, which I think is a common pain point for a lot of people. So I'm excited for the insights that you'll be able to share, not just about Hatch and Hatch AI, but like just certain metrics and the ways that you can look at the data.
Yeah, and I want to say that we don't all have to be we don't all have to be data mavens in order to look at some key metrics, the KPIs that are important to gain insights for how our business is working to make adjustments.
Yep.
I'm by far and away, I'm not a data analyst. So hopefully some of the folks on this call have data analysts in their company. It can take, cut the data lots of different ways. So I want to keep this at a real simplistic level on what are some things that you can look at to make improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everybody kind of has, everybody's got metrics they want to hit. And sometimes just a matter of like, you don't know what metrics that you want to track or benchmarks. So I think just any time that we can bring somebody on that can just help orient people with the ways that they can be thinking about it can help them to kind of figure out what their next steps are in identifying their data points. Cool. So I want to just start off on that note, Jim. So basically, guys, with this webinar, I want to just also reiterate, we kind of have two parts. We've got, we're going to be talking with Jim about his experience on how he optimized his Hatch account. And for those of you who aren't currently using Hatch, there's a lot of insights here to just be gathered on optimizing your communication strategy in general. So this will benefit you whether or not you're a Hatch customer. We're also going to talk about how and why Jim added on AI to his Hatch account using Hatch AI. And then we're going to do an update on Hatch Voice. We're going to be bringing Charlie Laswell on. He's one of our product managers, and he's going to walk you through a few screenshots or screen shares on what those voice features are going to look like. So stay tuned. Lots of good stuff to come. All right. So Jim, speaking of the data, I'd love, you and I have talked about this, but I'd love for you to share with the audience, like this, the high level of this is more leads does not necessarily mean more appointments or more sales. And in fact, it may mean the opposite. So can you walk us through like how you came to that and what data you were looking at?
Yeah. So you would think that would be true. It's intuitive that the more leads that you buy, then that you're going to see the rate of conversions increase and the set appointments increase, as well as your demos and then ultimately sales. One would think that that's true. And I noticed after I started that from in early part of 2024, that kind of the groundwork had been laid to increase exponentially the number of leads that we were buying from a paid lead perspective. And we jumped from we jumped our leads about 60 the number of leads that we were buying about 60% from January to May. And again, the strategy was, or the thought was, hey, if we increase the number of leads and add on all of these paid lead services, we are going to reap the benefits of it. So what we found though, after the first 6 months is we weren't seeing the sales return. And in fact, we were not even seeing the same increase, the increase in set rates track with the increase in leads that we were adding. And in many months, the reverse was true, that it was actually down. So I did an analysis, and the conclusion that we came to is that just because you are buying more leads and spending money does not mean that you're going to have those results, that you're going to increase your set rates. At best, in a month, we stayed flat. At worst, we dipped. So as I peeled back the onion further and looked at the relationship between the change in lead rate, the change in lead volume to the change in set rate, which is kind of our first step in the funnel that we can control, is that we didn't increase the set rates at all. In fact, they declined. In fact, all we did was increase the cost of marketing about 200%. So when you look at that and think, wow, you're going to be spending a lot of money on leads, it's going to deliver, not necessarily.
Mhm.
And to me, the insight was, okay, if volume alone is not driving the key metrics of our business, then what can? So yes, another conversation for another day might be, how do you get the right set of lead sources in your mix and kind of optimize that? But for this conversation, it was, wait a second, if I'm seeing a drop off or at best a level of set rates, there's got to be some type of engagement that's missing. So it led me to, how do we better engage with our consumers at that very first step as we're going down the funnel? And that led me to, how can we better use Hatch? And then ultimately, how do we use Hatch AI to better that experience? Did that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. And there's a few comments here. Jose mentioned that the quality of leads from paid services is very low. That is his comment. And yes, like, you're gonna have lower quality leads come then, from maybe like your organic or your website. Yes, that is a whole other conversation too. Like, working with your lead providers and making sure you're getting quality leads and finding the right filtering there. But yes, it also does come down to, how are you treating those leads? And, Jim, you and I talked about, it's kind of two-part. Like, you knew that there wasn't necessarily attention. There wasn't, you were buying these leads, and then being able to reach out to them right away was kind of a pain point. And Hatch kind of took care of that for you, right? Because of that automated messaging. But when people responded to that automated campaign, that's where you guys were kind of getting bottlenecked, right?
That's right. I mean, and we're, being a small company, we have very few customer service representatives or call center representatives that are able to take on that influx of messages that we're getting from customers that have questions. And we don't have a separate marketing team, on the Hatch dashboard responding. We have our call center doing it, and they kept up as much as they can. But when we increase so exponentially the number of leads, it also increased the interactions, but we didn't always respond to them timely. And I think that we were losing opportunities with a bit of a backlog.
Yeah, and that's actually the main reason why we built Hatch AI, because we had customers that were, they were getting 4 times higher response rates, which is great. They're multiplying their output. So it would be like, with one rep, you could 4x your response rates by automating your outreach. But now you only had one rep to handle 4 times the number of responses. And some people were actually even canceling with Hatch because they just ended up with an inbox that they couldn't keep up with.
Yeah, that's right. And if I could just address something that that was said by one of your participants a couple of seconds ago about the quality of leads. You're absolutely right. And that's something that you need to take a look at, and something that I did. When you look at the reasons why leads are not good, why they're low quality, we kind of bucketed them into, is it bad data that we were receiving, or out of scope or out of territory, versus the bucket of unable to reach. And we found that our unreachables by phone or through Hatch or other automated messages was about 30%. So that's a big chunk of the leads that we're buying that I kind of categorize as not working leads, because we can't reach them. So I would say to anybody who's having this problem is to have that discussion through your regular conversations with your lead generator, by being active in getting them timely and regular disposition reports, so they know that you have your eye on the quality of those leads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part of that, well, I want to say one other thing is, for those of you on the webinar, please put your questions in here. I would love for this to be an interactive webinar. Like, I've got my questions that I want to ask Jim, but I encourage you guys to throw in your questions and comments. And I see, Jose, you have another one in here, which I'll get to in a second. Yeah, actually, I'll get to it now. So Jose says Hatch does a great job contacting Angie customers right away. However, sometimes they do not answer, and the conversion rate of the appointments is not as high as we expected it, which makes sense, Jose. And I think what you said earlier is like the it's not necessarily always that the quality of the leads is lower with the lead aggregator services, but it's the intent of the lead is a little bit lower because it's not like they went to your website and filled out your contact us form. They are shopping around. They went to Angie because they were like, I need to find some companies. So those leads, it may take some more touches in order to get them to respond. So if you're a Hatch customer, great, because that's part of what we do is we make sure that you reach out not just once, but like over the course of several days. And then something that we'll get into in a little bit, which Jim can speak to, is following up on them, and then also just like consistently reaching out to them over the course of the customer journey.
I would also add to that, and this is a little farther down the funnel, is pay attention to your cancellation data. We found at one point that we were having, and the cancellation usually occurs between when you set and when you confirm. And if you look at what that rate is and document what the reason for the cancellation, it's going to give you much more insight to be able to address that cancellation within your call center, and not just accepting it as a cancellation, but following up either through Hatch, which we have a cancellation response for, or with your call center to incentivize those people who have canceled. And there are many reasons for cancellation, and not understanding that is I think a detriment to all of us. Find out if it was because they decided they were going to get a competitor estimate, or a competitor in your marketplace happened to get the appointment quickly, or there was a price concern. I mean, just having data in your CRM that says canceled is good, but not as good as it can be by going a little bit granular on the reasons.
Right. And then you can do your campaigns later, like, hey, we noticed that you canceled with us because, we noticed that we didn't move forward because of this reason. Like, we're running a promotion now, and that kind of thing. So it's definitely like, the Hatch Audience Builder is great, but you have to know how to work it, and you also have to make sure you have data.
100%. And we just instituted a program where we're not necessarily advertising it, but our call center knows that if there was a price consideration and they canceled and we get them on the phone, that we can give them, let's say, an additional discount of something if they keep their appointment within the next 72 hours. So knowing that gives you the ability to react accordingly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna veer us back on track here. I am seeing more questions in here, and we're going to answer them. So don't worry. I see your question, Evan, and I see Robin had a question, and Andrew is also answering some of these questions right in the chat. So Jim, back to like this theme of optimizing. It was kind of like a two-pronged thing, right? Like your company was already using Hatch when you came on board, but not to the fullest. And then on top of that, you wanted to you wanted to use regular Hatch better, and then you wanted to use Hatch AI. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the things you did apart from the AI to just utilize Hatch better?
Yeah, so pretty much we were using Hatch as our speed to lead manager, which was good. I think those settings were good, and it captured all of the speed to lead campaigns with all of the paid lead generators that we had coming in. We also had set up kind of a 30 to 45 day campaign where within that period of time after a lead was received, if an appointment hadn't been set, we would initiate a communication with that customer. By the same token, cancellations were part of it. So the first thing that I did was within speed to lead, which honestly is where the game is in this, is really optimizing the communications and paying attention to how how we were talking to customers and in text and email, and how frequently or infrequently we were talking to customers. And I think there's a balance there on the frequency. I encourage everybody to take a look at, you can hire a mystery shopper to do this or have one of your agencies do it, but I would encourage you guys to take an honest look at how you're communicating with your customers from a outside perspective. We found at one point that we were over communicating to our customers, that somehow within the first 6 days, if my recollection serves, we had reached out to a prospect 29 times. Well, I would argue to say that that is way too much for anybody to have to deal with, and that you need to have a better balance of, yes, let's be aggressive and continue to reach out with them with consistency and in good messaging, rather than bombard our customers with lots of emails and texts. That is not going to be good for your brand, and it is just going to discourage customers from using you in the first place. So find a good solution for that for your particular customer base. The other thing that we did right away was we rewrote the communications to make the texts a little shorter and not these long blurbs, and then the emails really more at first introductory about our brand, our anchoring, or our being local in Southwest Florida, our connection to Southwest Florida, and then about our brand proposition. And I think that if you think of it as a relationship that you're going to maintain rather than a transaction, every communication, you're going to have better success with your customers. I like to look at it as, let's create a customer experience that's going to be ideal versus let's create a transactional system, because I think that's a danger territory.
Yeah, you make a good point. This is something in our like messaging best practices guide is like, if you want to adjust our templates, great, but adhere to the best practices. And the main thing we always try to stick to is like, not even just like keeping it away from being transactional, but just keeping it conversational, like one sentence, and then end it with something that just asks for a response. So it's like, hey, we saw you filled out our form. Like, what are you looking for? Or like, is now a good time to talk? It just keeps them quick instead of like, hey, we do this, 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 and this. You're trying to sell them in one text, and you're not going to, regardless, even if you had the best company possible. So just engaging them, like you're saying, is kind of the goal.
Yeah, I think that exactly to that point, that there's a danger in just saying, buy from us, buy from us, buy from us, buy from us. Well, they have to build that relationship and that trust, and they're going to do their own investigation they're going to Google you. They're going to look at your referrals. They're going to look at the recommendations that you have online. They're going to do all of this stuff to understand what the brand means before they're going to just respond immediately to a text or an email that says buy from.
Yep, exactly. And so just to recap, the things that Jim did to optimize Hatch was, it sounds like, you guys may have veered off of the templates a little bit. So your messages were pretty long. So you kind of reinstated, you shortened the messaging, you added in a few more campaigns, which I think is important. And because, people, they fall off the map, right? So you have speed to lead and you have estimate follow-up, but like, what about if they never actually got an estimate? What if they never booked an appointment? You're reaching back out there. And then, like you said, you focused it on, like, I love how you said when I interviewed you before that Hatch is not just like a text and an email platform. It's a relationship building platform.
Yeah. And I think that makes all the difference. And, there's so many things that we can do. And I mean, I'll be honest, we haven't tapped into the full power of it either. I don't want to sell your audience that we have. I think that there are ways that we can improve the customer relationship with, like, I think we have a need for appointment follow-up in Hatch, because we will have an appointment and then that customer won't necessarily have decided And if we're not engaging with that customer, we will make a follow-up call. But what happens if the one person who's responsible for appointment follow-ups isn't available for a week or so? It falls into the black hole. And I think that this is a solution where this level of engagement just can keep the conversation going with the customer.
Yeah. And on that note, this is what Hatch AI helps with, especially with those speed to lead conversations, because the automated message goes out and then customers don't respond right away. They may respond after hours. They may respond when your CSR is on break. So Jim, can you tell the audience about like your AI bot Rachel and what she does?
So Rachel, which we don't take credit for her name. Your team and the great onboarding team at Hatch came up with Rachel, and we loved it. We thought it sounded great. But Rachel is an aggregate of all of our paid lead generators combined into one. So we built in that all of the leads from Angie and Bluefire and all of the others that even from our own website flow in through Rachel. And she takes on the initial speed to lead, the initial conversation and introduction from the moment it gets into the system, and follows it through until there is a need to turn it over to a real live sales rep or real live customer service rep. So what she has done is she's hopped on the immediacy required for an inquiry from a potential customer and gets them engaged in a very polite and nice way that I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, that we programmed for her for, and she learned through pretty quickly on how to talk to customers and what to seek out from them in order to progress the conversation.
Yep. Great. So yeah, Rachel, like Jim said, she comes in. So the way you can think about Hatch and how the automation and the AI work together is you've got your automation, and that is, Hatch integrates with your lead sources and your CRM so that you can make trigger campaigns. If a new lead comes in, it triggers a campaign. If an estimate appointment is completed and 2 days has gone by, it triggers a campaign. And that automation is great, but then what happens when people respond? And that's where the AI, when the person responds, it activates the AI. So in Jim's case, Rachel is their AI agent, and she handles all of that, like all the initial conversation, so that when it's time for, if the lead is not qualified, then Rachel will say, thanks, she'll politely part ways with that lead. If the lead is qualified, she will pass it off to a human, right, to do the scheduling. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's kind of an optimization that I want to look at in the future. Is that how can we enable Rachel at some point to even get her to the point of setting the appointments. We haven't crossed that bridge yet, but yeah, I've been really surprised how agile Rachel is in responding to questions from customers. So much so that there are some customers, I believe, we're not trying to trick anybody, but some customers, I believe, based on their responses, don't know that they're talking to a bot. And I think that that's great. So, yes.
Yeah, totally. And I think the other part of this that is, if you can talk about what that has done, people in the call center may have been worried about losing their jobs. Like how did they react to AI, and how has it helped them?
So I was really cautious about that and had conversations with our owners before we decided that we were going to implement it. I was pretty much sold on the proposition that AI was the way to manage our speed to lead at the very least. And if everybody who pays attention to what's going on in the AI space, at least until recently, everybody thinks, oh my God, it's going to be a job stealer. It's going to be a job stealer. And I think that people hear that without knowing all of the facts. So I wanted to be careful, particularly with my call center, who does the majority of the work that Rachel is doing to make sure that they were bought into the benefits of Rachel AI versus just hearing we're implementing AI and leading them to anxiety about the security of their job. So I approached this with our owners, and then we had delicate conversations with the call center about, hey, here are the benefits that Rachel is going to be able to provide in terms of managing customer engagement, and taking a lot of the burden on effective response out from under your responsibility, but still giving you the ability to intervene when you need to. And there's always, anybody who monitors the dashboard can see, hey, I need to take over this conversation, and we give them the option to doing it. And I think that having those conversations are important, and at least they were for us. And it sets people up for trusting the organization versus just having something, placed upon them without input.
Yep. And how has AI impacted your call center manager, like their day-to-day?
So pretty immediately, our call center manager said, I love Rachel. This is great. I don't have to be on the dashboard all the time managing every single conversation. We paid attention to it with regularity for the first few weeks to make sure that Rachel was responding appropriately and there weren't any weird glitches and interpretations. But as time progressed, she was like, wow, I have more time on my hands now to make calls and follow up with customers than kind of fending the immediate questions, or frankly, and I think I used this word when I talked to you before, the perfunctory kind of questions where, you're asking in the first couple of minutes of a conversation, verify your name, verify your address, verify your zip code, verify, what product you're interested in, all of these kind of prerequisite questions that you have to have, when deciding whether or not that this customer opportunity is one to pursue. And Rachel takes care of that. So those two things alone made it an immediate impact. We can talk about some of the results that we saw on the KPIs, but that was the immediate impact.
Yeah, let's go into some of the results if you want to share them.
Yeah. So again, I want to preface that this is really top line, and you absolutely, and this is from a perspective of a marketer versus a data analyst. But just looking at my notes here, before Rachel was employed on our Hatch profile, we were our set rate. We started August 1st. Our set rate for the first 7 months of 2024 was about 9.4%. After Rachel came on board, the first 3 months of Rachel, it jumped to 16%. So that's 5.5% in a set rate. That's not blowing the doors off anything, but that is an increase that is a step in the right direction. And I'm really happy about that. I just looked at November's numbers, and our set rate is up 27.3%. So we're going in the right direction. I also want to be clear is that the only influencer on how set rates go up? No, but it is an important first step in going down the funnel. From an engagement standpoint, the number of conversations that we had pre-Rachel and after Rachel went from 13% to 46%. So that, I think, is significant. And what it means is that these conversations are relevant enough to keep it going, to keep the customer engaged, and that's a win for us.
Yeah, I think that retention is one of the key themes here. Like the campaign automation is key in just keeping the customer engaged throughout the journey, right? Like when they fill out a form, you engage them. When they finish off an appointment, you're looking to create this campaign, but you can do this in Hatch. You engage them. When they have an appointment, like you reach out and you let them know that. So just keeping that communication throughout the journey is something that customers both appreciate consciously, and then subconsciously, it also keeps them top of mind. And then you're also retaining them in the outreach is one thing, but when they respond to you, now you've got the bot that allows that immediate response to keep going, so that now you're engaging them in the conversation. And then just overall, they're just having a better experience. So they're going to be more apt to stay with you over time.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Yep. So I want to take a few minutes to answer a few of the questions here that are for Jim. We'll go over some of them, and then we do have Charlie on the call. So in about 5 minutes, we will have Charlie, our product manager, do a walkthrough of voice, and we'll answer your questions about voice there. And also when we talk about, when we do the Q&A about voice, feel free to also add in any other questions you have if they're not directly related to voice. So let's see. Evan wants to know, Jim, if you're having success with the ringless voicemail feature in Hatch, and if so, how you're incorporating it into your campaign.
I don't think we're utilizing that feature yet. No.
Yep. Okay.
Again, another opportunity for us to develop and to perfect this.
Yep, for sure. And Evan, as a sneak peek, that is, I mean, the ringless voicemail is one thing, but actually adding a call step to campaigns is something that we're going to cover in about 5 minutes when Charlie jumps on. I will say that we do have customers that use the ringless voicemail feature, and it's really helpful because obviously, like, it just shows up as a missed call on a voicemail, and it's one more touch point. Another way that customers like to use Hatch is they leave the calling as a separate, like, they leave the manual actual reaching out as a separate function. So let's say a person does the technician goes in and does an appointment or an estimate. The sales rep has 24 hours to do the follow-up. And if after 24 hours, if there's no contact made with that customer, then the Hatch campaign is set to go out. So that's another way of doing it, where like you could have a calling, if whether it's call or email, you have the rep doing the manual outreach, and then you have it in as a backup for Hatch. Robin wants to know if Hatch integrates with other services, and thank you, Andrew, who answered. We integrate with lead sources and CRMs, mostly native integrations, which is a plus because you don't have to, create Zapier connections. I want to go back. Christopher Landon, he wanted to see how AI could help with leads that are 30 days or older that aren't being worked. Jim kind of touched on how he's using Hatch for this purpose, not necessarily with AI, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, that's kind of like you have that campaign now for leads that have not booked, and they're not new leads, but they're aged.
30 to 45 days old.
Yep.
And I think that this is a great area for improvement for us, one where we're setting up the automation through Hatch, but I think that that's probably the next bridge with Rachel that we want to cross, because there is opportunity for us in that particular time frame. And I think we need to first perfect our communication and then use Rachel as much as we possibly can in this. We haven't done that yet. We have automation set up, but there's definitely room for improvement there. But I agree that reaching out to customers at that point, if they haven't scheduled an appointment within 30 days, is worth doing. Yeah. Is there a huge amount of volume there? I don't know. I think everybody would agree that, getting them in the first 70 to 96 hours is going to be important.
Yep.
More important than anything. But there are going to be some that you'll leave on the table that for whatever reason walked away, and re-engaging them has to be part of it.
Yeah. And I think that if they're older than 30 days, they're not a warm or hot lead by any means. But the more campaigns that you have, so you may have a campaign for that, and you may also have a campaign for, it's been 60 days since you sent an estimate. Hey, where are you at? Like we were in touch a couple months ago. Like, those campaigns aren't going to necessarily be your most successful, but collectively, if you have a set of those campaigns, those can be bringing in enough to collectively to increase your revenue and increase, eventually close.
Yeah. And I would say from a content standpoint, this particular this particular avenue is probably ripe for something like reaching out to the 30 to 45 day customers with a special offer, or we want to introduce you to the 30% discount or the $3,000 off for a limited period of time. Or it may be ripe for, hey, haven't engaged you in a while, come into our showroom at a designated time where we know we're going to have staff available, kind of like an open house. We like to address them and, hey, come and meet us.
Yeah.
Also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one more thing on, if AI can help with that, Christopher, it kind of goes back to the primary way that people are using Hatch AI at the moment is like, AI is not there to like take over and do all the CSR work, right? Like the automation is there, so you can create a campaign for any use case you want, and then the AI is there to just be the first responder, so that when a customer responds, so like for example, in the speed to lead campaign, the AI bot is great because there's so many rinse and repeat questions that you have to ask the same questions every time. Are you the property owner? Is it residential or commercial? Like, are you like what can you give me more details? So all of that information is pretty standard. So you can have a bot doing that. And now your humans aren't doing that. And by the time the human gets the conversation, they just have all the information and they're like, hey, you're ready to schedule. In the case of using a bot for maybe an estimate follow-up or an age lead, yeah, like for an age lead campaign, that's great. Because if a customer responds, then you can train the bot to then jump in and say, cool, let me collect your information. If it's an estimate follow-up campaign, it may only be 1 or 2 interactions for the bot before they pass it off to a human. But the idea is any part of the conversation that can be automated and handled by AI is, so that by the time your humans get it, it's saving them time. It's also disqualifying the people that your humans don't need to talk to, so that by the time they talk to them, your leads are more, warmer and more qualified.
Yeah, and don't forget rehash, because sometimes we look at rehash as there's the dreaded rehash list that our call center agents have to deal with. It naturally comes across as like low priority because they feel like, wow, we have all of these inbound new leads and speed to lead to that are hot to respond to. Rehash, the person has said no. That doesn't seem like low-hanging fruit, so it goes neglected. But we all know that rehash is going to deliver a certain amount of sales to your organization. So whether it's you're using traditional Hatch or using AI in Hatch for rehash, please do. And it's a balance between, I think, how, again, because you don't want to over message your customers, what is the right balance between what the call center is going to do and what Hatch or AI can then supplement on rehash.
Yep, absolutely. And 2 things to what you just said, Jim, is we just did a webinar with John Wilson a couple weeks ago, and that, he has an entire function dedicated to rehash, and it's huge. Like but it is so hard. If you're juggling many things, like those immediate leads, you want to get those right away. But if you can automate that rehash part, you can be reaping those benefits without having to add in, without having to allocate more resources to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And then the other part of that, I forget what it was, but we have one more question here from Evan. And this might be more in the weeds than you're able to answer, Jim, but whatever you can answer, how much of that 27% made it into the home? Were there issues with qualification? So that is I think your 27% set rate.
Right.
Did you have issues with like cancellations or anything like that, or any insight you can shed there?
So our 27% was the set rate that we had. You know what, Evan, I didn't pull what the actual demo rate was. I'm sorry, I didn't look at that KPI. But that's a good one. And you should, I can, perhaps I can look at that, Kristen, and send it back to you, and then you can send it on to Evan. I'm happy.
Yeah. I think that the overall point is that it's a good question if you're not looking at that. So Evan just said it's fine. He's a KPI nerd. You're all good. So yeah, you don't have to answer that directly, Jim. But clearly, if you ever want to talk data, Evan would be down. But I think the takeaway here is that it is important to look at all of that. And I know, Jim, we're going to do another webinar in Q1 on kind of data and metrics. So yeah, and Evan, reach out if you want to get on a webinar and talk data, like hit me up. I think you can put I'll put my email address in here. Yeah, we're always looking for webinar people to come on and talk about stuff. So, okay, that being said, I want to give the stage to Charlie. Charlie, are you here on the webinar? Can you activate like your camera? There he is. There he is. All right, cool. Well, Charlie, everybody, I want to introduce you to Charlie. He is a product manager at Hatch, and he has been in charge of, and is still and will be in charge of our voice launch. So there's kind of two parts to our voice launch. We've got human voice, adding call step to campaigns, all the way up to voice AI. And as promised, we're going to give you an update on that. Charlie, are you going to share your screen?
Yeah, that was the idea. Let me see if I'm able to share screen, entire screen. There we go. That's infinity, but this should be working for everybody. Everybody can see this?
Yep, we can see your screen. So take it away, and you guys put your questions in the chat, and we will answer them as we go.
Awesome. So I think it's good to provide maybe some background. I know that we have calling and Hatch today, but what we've been tasked with on what we're calling the human voice team is getting voice calls to cooperate with your campaign cadences. So that's what we have ready today, and we expect to launch to all customers in the new year. But this is the campaign editor, which hopefully everyone is familiar with. We have our existing ways of communicating with contacts, which are text, emails, and voicemail drops. We're now adding phone calls as a step in a campaign, which we're pretty excited about. Phone calls operate basically the same exact way as any other step in a campaign would. The only difference would be that we don't have the ability to control whether users are making the call or not making the call. So when you're making relative decisions in terms of saying, have an SMS follow up a phone call, those are just relative to whenever the phone notification hits the sales board, which we'll get to in just a second. But if we created a campaign, just called it our voice speed to lead campaign, it would look like this. It would start off with a phone call, and then we would have an SMS afterwards saying, hello, we just tried to call you, with the typical language following that up. But when you hit this phone call at the top of your speed to lead campaign, assuming it's an instant launch, we can discard these changes. If you go back to the sales board, what happens is you get the closed card version of a contact meeting whatever audience is associated with that workflow, and it comes straight to the top of your inbox. The rest of your conversations would be here, and you'd be able to click into this contact, and it gives you a reminder at the bottom that says, call this contact. And it also mentions which campaign this contact has been a part of. So you have all your opportunity data here. You have the campaign named here, which hopefully gives you enough context to know exactly what you're calling the contact about. And when you call the contact, this has my phone number set up with it. It works. At the conclusion of the call, you have the ability to disposition the call is the idea. So whether they picked up the phone, didn't pick up the phone is important information that's going to be sent back and stored on the contact record. So if someone's not answered, what would happen is the contact would receive the SMS messages and the rest of the campaign cadence as normal. But if they answer the call, you have the ability to take them out of the campaign so that they don't receive further messaging and say, this contact was sold. You move them to the sold column on your sales board and say, I made a sale. We're following up following up Monday. And then you can save that for the contact. This gets stored in your notes here alongside any other notes which are in Hatch. And if you go back to the sales board, now this contact is in the sold column. That's pretty much the entire cadence. Kristen, did I miss anything of the feature?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I think that's good. I'm gonna look and see if there's any questions here. And Jim, you're also welcome to ask any questions you have. Evan wants to know: does this qualify as an auto dialer for TCPA changes, or does this work around that?
I don't believe this qualifies as an auto dialer because it doesn't automatically dial a number. It's just a reminder to make an outbound call, which would be done manually. In the future, when we have voice AI integrated into the platform, I think there's going to be a different compliance conversation. But really, this hasn't affected the way that calling works in Hatch. The only thing that changes is the way that calling is integrated into campaign cadences for now.
Yeah, I think this is a big, this has been a request from Hatch users for a while now, being able to add in this calling functionality, because right now, text and email and ringless voicemail is happening as a separate function from calling. And so by putting them all in one campaign, you can actually not just have it all happen in one, but you can track it all in one place and see all the activity that has happened. Donna wants to know, Jose wants to know, what happens if the customer answers the phone? I think that's just a disposition change, right?
Yeah, so the dispositioning is done by the person who's making the outbound call. So it relies on the user to make sure that they're notating whatever happens on that call correctly. But in the course of that call, I think in the longer term, we'll have features that integrate with while you're on the call. So a live transcription can be added as you're speaking to a contact. We can have recordings added afterwards. These are things which are going to be part of this feature in the future. But for now, really, this is just in the course of the call, you're just calling and talking on the phone.
Donna wants to know, does the disposition transfer to the CRM, or is it simply stored on the Hatch contact information?
We have webhooks set up for dispositioning. So all of those dispositions could go straight back into your CRM. We just need to set that up for you.
Great. Evan wants to know, what action regarding calling would pull the customer out of the campaign? Does that phone call stop, say, a 120-day long nurture?
Yeah, so it'll pull you out of whatever call you happen to be in. So if your contact history, your query for that 120-day campaign says, don't include anyone who has the campaign history of has been contacted in the last 120 days, then this would pull you out of it. But it would depend on what the query is for that specific campaign, I would say. But it can pull you out immediately of the campaign that this contact is currently in. So that voice speed to lead campaign that I drafted up that pulled it onto the sales board, that it, after saying answered, it would be logged as such.
Got it. Evan also apologizes for asking so many questions. Do not be sorry, Evan. We love having questions on here, and you're probably asking what a lot of people want to know. So keep asking. You have one more question on here. Can you import call queuing, or is it just going to be campaign based?
Call queuing for an individual user, I think I would need to know a little bit more, but you can absolutely have 10 of these closed cards pop up on your sales board and say, call each one of these. It wouldn't take you immediately from call to outbound call, but it would be very easily clickable here from your sales board, I would say. I think that we're hoping to get some user feedback about how people want to use this, because it seems like, depending on the contact, if you have 3 different voice campaigns going on, you might want to take a look back at the conversation history, some of the opportunities associated with a given contact, just to make sure you have the full context before you're thrown onto the phone with somebody.
For sure. Jim, do you have any questions?
No, but when we're ready, I want to respond to Evan's question about the demo rates.
You got the demo question. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and answer that? You can go for it.
Yeah, so Evan, I just looked at the data, and out of the set rate of 27% that you referenced, 32% of those made it to demo. So that's telling us that our cancellation rate is really high, and it's something that we really need to take a look at. The demo rate was the same before we started, Rachel, but I mean that's a little bit farther down the funnel, so that indicates to me that we need to explore how we're talking to customers and what their reasons are for canceling.
Also, could be a good use case for appointment reminder campaigns, because that can really help get people to. I know one of our solar customers. She said that they improved they reduced their cancellation or their no-show rate when they started using Hatch. So cool. Evan says thank you for that. So, and yes, thank you, Jim, for diving into that. We have another question here about voice for Charlie. Mandy wants to know what it looks like to the end user.
What does it look like to the end Hatch user to be making outbound calls? I think I'd need a little more help.
Does the end user see that it is from me and not spam? I think, yeah, go ahead. Do you get it now?
Yeah, so the phone number for an outbound call from Hatch would just be whatever your Hatch number is. So it's not a spam phone call. If they have your Hatch number already in their phone, what would come up is the same number as expected. Okay,
got it. And then Mandy says when the client receives the text voice.
It's the same SMS number. So if you've been communicating over SMS with the customer, the phone call that comes in is exactly the same number.
Okay, great. Before we go into any other questions, I do want to just launch this poll. You'll see it show up on your screen. If you are a current Hatch customer and you maybe want help with like optimizing your account, maybe you want to talk about AI, anything that you want to talk about with your account manager, you can select option A. And if you are not currently a Hatch customer and want to learn more, we will have somebody reach out to you. You can ask your questions. You can get a demo. So I'll leave this poll open so you guys can, raise your hand.
Kristen, may I offer one other thing?
Yeah.
So for any of you that are interested in crossing the bridge to AI, I want to tell you that my experience with Hatch was really seamless in this. It is such an easy process. It probably takes 2 to 3 phone conversations and a little bit of work to set up your business profile and get the conversations going so the bot understands. But I would say that you're not doing this alone, that every step of the way is going to be with your account manager and your onboarding specialist, who's really going to hold your hand on the process. And for somebody who was not particularly tech savvy, that made all the difference in the world to me.
That's great feedback. Love to hear that, Jim. And yeah, I would say that is it's definitely a point of concern for people, is like, how do I even get started with AI? And it sounds like for you, you were taken care of and now you feel pretty comfortable with it.
Totally. And the ability of your team to respond to adjustments is fantastic and very quick. I mean, they're right on it. So it's great.
Love that. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you sharing that feedback proactively. And I hope that anybody on the call that has any hesitations about AI, I hope that helps to give you some confidence, because we do know that AI is not going anywhere. So wherever you can get started, get started. Dave says they are signing up today. Love that, Dave. Welcome aboard. Cool. Let's see. Any other questions? So Charlie, I think you answered. Mandy asked, can you preface with a text message saying, hey, it's Mandy, listen here. And then you answered saying voicemails and voice calls can fit in with anything that's in your campaign cadence. Yeah. So you can create a campaign that like starts off with a call. So like a lot of times our customers were delaying that text message, like making it delay 15 minutes so that the rep would have time to call. Now, instead of that, you can actually have a call step. And that might impact the way that your messages are written out. Like, hey, we just tried calling you, or like, hey, this is so-and-so here. Like, if I don't hear back, like maybe I'll give you a call tomorrow or something. So we also, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, but we will also likely be creating some templates for campaigns that include calling, just to help you out with that verbiage.
Definitely. I think templates are a good way to go, but I would say, when it comes down to it, whatever feels the most authentic for your customers, honestly, probably works the best. And the campaign editor should be pretty straightforward to play around with if you get the time.
That's great. Christopher Landon said, just fired all my call center reps, excited for all my new Rachels. Well, guys, this has been really fun. Jim, I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been great. We've learned a lot from you, and look forward to another webinar in January. We're going to be talking more about, Jim does really well with, stay on top of his leads and all the lead sources. So guys, keep an eye out for that. And one more comment here from Mandy. A lot of our clients are senior citizens, so we wouldn't just want them to ignore the voice messages. That makes sense, Mandy. And again, the customization of the campaigns is really important, because we do have customers where their audience is an older demographic. So you can customize it as you want. And we're also happy to give you suggestions on ways that you can like optimize your messaging to cater to that older demographic. Charlie, thank you for your time and for walking us through the voice V1 of voice. There's so many more features to come. There's AI to come. So, and then to all of you who showed up, really appreciate it. Keep asking your questions, keep showing up. We're going to be doing a lot more of these webinars in 2025. This is actually the last webinar of 2024. So you will get a recording sent to you of this webinar. It'll be an auto send with the full recording. And then we always do a written recap to just give you like the high level, the too long didn't read or too long didn't watch highlights. And then last but not least, if the recaps will come from me. If you have any suggestions or requests on things that you want to learn or go over in webinars, I'm always looking for feedback. We're really looking to try to ramp up our webinars in 2025, especially with some more like Hatch specific webinars on optimizing your account. So I'm open and ready for all feedback, and would love to have you guys help guide our strategy. So on that note, thank you everybody, and have a great holiday season, and we will see you guys next year.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.